Chapter 7. Nikolai sat bolt upright on the wooden boards of the bed where he lay sleeping. He tried to clear the fog from his tired mind to make sense of his surroundings. Where was he? What was he doing here? On your feet, men. We don't have all day to lie around spinning dreams. There's work to be done. On your feet. Nikolai heard a crash and then a groan just a few feet away. He turned on his bed to see a pile of boards from one of the bunks and a man underneath them. Above him towered a guard with shafts of dusty morning sunlight streaming through the open doorway behind him. Now Nikolai remembered where he was. The guard strode to where Nikolai was laying, but Nikolai scrambled to his feet and to attention before the guard could take a swipe at him too. "That's better," growled the guard in what Nikolai imagined must be a tone of satisfaction. "You've got 30 seconds to line up in front of the cabin. Better yet, let's see you make it in 20." Without a second thought, Nikolai dashed out into the early morning sun, now already well above the northeastern horizon. Even so, the hour was still early. Nikolai figured it couldn't be more than 5 or 5:30 in the morning. He squinted at the brightness of the sun and wondered how the sun could rise so early this far north. But, of course, that with the tilt of the Earth's axis during the summer months, places this far north had more daylight than cities farther south, like Moscow or Kiev back home. When the guards came out of the barracks, Nikolai was still trying to button his shirt and straighten his trousers. It was good that he had boots to wear and not shoes to lace up, or he wouldn't have made it out into the courtyard this fast with all his clothes on. Nikolai glanced down at his appearance. It was true that his clothes weren't on completely straight, and his shirt wasn't buttoned up all the way, but he was relieved to know that he had somehow managed to straighten himself up in a few seconds. The guard had allowed them. Again, Nikolai tried to shake the fog from his eyes and mind. There was no way to escape the reality of his surroundings. He was in a prison camp, somewhere in Siberia, at the end of a long train ride from the west. And one thing was, he was going to survive this place of desolation at the ends of the earth. He was going to have to learn to get up on time. Actually, getting up well before he was called would be better. This was his first morning in camp, and it seemed that he was expected to know everything about the rules and regulations of the place. But Nikolai was quickly learning that one rule seemed to overshadow all others: never be late. He struggled to think positive thoughts as he stood at attention in the row of prisoners lined up in front of the barracks. The idea of having to do this every morning for the next 5 years, 10 years, or however long it took the KGB authorities to figure out they had punished him enough was almost more than he could bear. "For being late, you boys can skip breakfast this morning," the guard barked. "That'll teach you to sleep in." No one moved. "Well, what are you waiting for?" he growled at the prisoners as the prisoners stared back at him. "You have work details. Get to your assignments. You three," he suddenly added, pointing at Nikolai and the other two new prisoners. "The warden wants to see you immediately." The three of them looked at one another with raised eyebrows. But when the guard turned and walked away, they shrugged and simply headed for the administration building. Nikolai thought it strange that the men in his barracks had been caught sleeping in. Weren't they used to camp life? And weren't they used to getting up this early every morning? Or was this just a show of force for Nikolai and the other new prisoners? And why weren't he and the others being escorted to the warden's quarters? The whole thing seemed kind of strange. But then Nikolai remembered how informal the place was. People were just expected to go about their business and do their jobs, he guessed. Nikolai was the last of the three to be called into the warden's office. As he stood at attention outside in the hallway, he wondered what went on in these kinds of prisons. What should he expect? Would he be interrogated again? Would he be mistreated because he was a Christian? When Nikolai finally stood in the warden's office, he was surprised at how simple the place appeared. Though the warden was a colonel in the Russian army, there was almost nothing in his office to dress it up. A medium-sized oak desk, 3 chairs, and a lone kerosene lamp, and a few books on a dusty bookshelf. After studying an official letter that had been sent him via the mailbag on the train, the warden cleared his throat. "You had a run-in with the KGB." Nikolai waited, but said nothing, since the warden's statement was more commentary than anything. "Nikolai Panchak." The warden put the official letter back in the folder on his desk. "I've got no use for preachers. As far as I'm concerned, you preachers are all just a bunch of rebels." The warden brought his fist down on the desk with a bang. "You think you can change the world," he growled. "Well, I've got news for you. The motherland is fine the way she is. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republic is the greatest nation the world has ever known. She doesn't need any help." The warden squinted at Nikolai through slit eyes. "Do you understand that, Panchak?" "Yes, sir." Even now, even though Nikolai was a Christian and didn't agree with the tactics the government used, he was still proud to be a citizen of the USSR. It made his chest swell to hear the national anthem and see athletes compete for the glory of the motherland. The officer leaned back in his chair. "I'll tell you what, Panchak." He seemed to cool a bit. "Let's forget about it was that got you here in the first place. If you follow my orders in this camp, I'll not give you any trouble. We'll let bygones be bygones. What do you say to that?" The warden began sorting through some other papers on his desk. Nikolai wondered whether the warden fully understood the charges being brought against him. He had to, hadn't he? The man had Nikolai's file. Did he know about the secret churches? Would he be expecting Nikolai to give him the list of church members? Of course, Nikolai knew he would never give such a list to the warden, not even if the warden should beat him, not even if the warden should kill him. But of course, the warden didn't know that. Nikolai wondered if he should just bring up the subject and get it all out in the open now. On the other hand, maybe he should just let the warden figure out for himself. "I want to cooperate, sir." Nikolai's face was stolid as he stood at attention and stared straight ahead. The warden stood to his feet suddenly. "Good, Nikolai. I'm glad to hear that." A slight grin edged the corners of his mouth. "Now I'm sending you to the wood shop. You'll be working with Vadim, the camp carpenter. Lots of work to do around here," he announced. "And remember, Panchuk," he added as he pointed the way for Nikolai, "follow orders, and you and I will get along just fine."